Again, great questions from everybody. We're excited for this next session about supercharging CSM playbooks or CS playbooks. We got Harshita joining us here. Come on up and tell us how we can do that in product adoption with in-app nudges.
All right, check.
And here's your clicker. Right here.
Check. Audible? No? Nope.
We got you.
Check.
Yep.
Better? Yeah, okay. Hi everyone, I'm Harshi, like the Hershey's chocolate. So the way I like to introduce myself is I'm a chartered accountant by education, I am a customer success by profession, and I am a DJ by passion. So a little bit of this, a little bit of that. If some of you attended Pulse 2 years ago, I DJ'd I opened the keynote on both days. So yes, I am that person. It's funny, in one of my interviews, I actually interviewed the current company I'm at, and one of the interviewers said, "Oh, weren't you the DJ at Pulse?" I'm like, okay, well, I was not expecting to have that conversation in an interview. So a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and that's what my professional journey has been. But specifically with respect to this topic, what I'd love to share is, currently I'm at Infor, leading customer experience at scale. So thinking about like systems first thinking, technology, one-to-many scale, digital, tech touch, all of that good stuff. And before that, I was at Gainsight. I spent about 4.5 years at Gainsight, started as a founding CSM on the Gainsight PX team, which is the in-app user engagement technology. For many of you who are not familiar with Gainsight PX, it directly successful. So some of what I'm going to share today is coming from like tried and tested playbooks. I also developed the tech touch, digital or scale customer success at Gainsight, both for Gainsight PX, but overall at Gainsight, like what that digital playbook looks like. So I'm hoping that you guys will be able to relate to some of it. And I'm taking a lot of that here at Infor. I've been at Infor for about 2 years. It's an 18,000 people company. And I was actually able to convince the entire org to bring an in-app user engagement technology, despite our past failure of Pendo implementation. So again, all of that to share, all of that to say that some of what I'm going to share today are tried and tested things that have worked personally for me and for a lot of customers we've implemented Gainsight PX with. So hopefully you'll find this interesting. Feel free to stop me actually in between and ask any questions that you have. Would love to keep it very like conversational. And before we jump into that, one question I have is, how many of you have used like an in-app user engagement technology in any of your existing CS? Okay, oh, quite a bunch. Any of you who are in the process of implementing it right now or trying to figure out how to use this thing or get value out of in-app user engagement technology? No. Any of you who are exploring how to get buy-in, organizational buy-in to actually bring this in-app user engagement technology? No. Okay. So, well, so maybe like from a couple of you, what would be like, what's your impetus actually to sit Why do you think it's not going to go anywhere, the conversation? I'm just curious.
It's not a really smart technology where we would use it. So it would just take a lot of dev work, and I just don't think it's going to happen.
Got it. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. Would love to address that. Because a lot of these technologies are actually no code, no dev work required, and that's why it's so cool. So it just requires a couple of weeks of dev sprint to get it into your application. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us, like in-app is like the best way to engage with our users because you are engaging with the users while they're using the product. So it's an easier way to drive adoption, and that's why we are like trying to implement it.
Okay, so you are trying to implement it.
I think one of the challenges that we've encountered is who owns this? You have marketing teams that see this as an upsell, cross-sell capability. Product teams want to control the UX user experience. CS teams want to sort of help drive adoption, feature capabilities, right? And so it requires a lot of cross-functional alignment,
right,
top down, before you can get the bottoms up to actually do it implementation. At least that's been the experience I've had.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm curious on how
that totally makes sense, and if time allows, I have a slide on that, and I'd love to actually share with you how I'm navigating that at Infor, because that's clearly like a big thing at bigger companies, but also smaller companies. All right. So let's jump right in. I was hoping to cover some typical pain points and challenges with respect to like current ways or channels of engaging with customers today, but typically what challenges our users or customers actually run into with respect to product adoption. Talk about product-led growth flywheel. This is something we had developed at Gainsight, and I still use it at Infor, very centered around customer journey and who should drive it. So I do have that. It's towards the appendix slides. And then I'm hoping that each of you could actually walk away with like very specific strategies to create a product experience which is very in-app related. And then any examples and some tips and tricks to even get strategic buy-in. So just to set context and sort of baseline what in-app is think of it as this is an illustrative example of like, think of new product onboarding and adoption as a use case, right? So kind of starting with personalized welcome message within the product, within the application. Typically, all of this is done over emails and calls, and we all know emails are like half the time we don't even look at them. So like really going into the product, the first time the user logs into the product, welcoming them, setting the expectation, walking them through step-by-step feature highlights and ending with a prescriptive next best action so that we are giving them an orientation of the product, setting expectations, and also guiding them as to what's the immediate next step they should be doing. And this what helps is in the backend, you can actually track adoption metrics. Now, this is where the dependency typically in most companies come on data science team or engineering team. This is where if you're using an in-app technology like a Pendo or a WalkMe or a Gainsight PX, it is basically 3 lines of code that goes into your application. It's probably 1 week's worth of sprint for your dev teams. Once this code is in the application, you're able to track the activities out of the box, and you're able to see all the adoption metrics. You can see user journeys, you can see which features are being used, you can see how much time it takes users to complete a workflow, even between steps, where the biggest drop-offs are. So when you have those kind of insights, and I'm sure many of you have actually used tools like Amplitude and like stuff that give user analytics. But the biggest difference is that with tools which just gives analytics and insights, the second piece of it is how to action on it is typically laggard, because there is no engine to actually act on it immediately, and it requires an extra workflow for us to figure out how to actually action on this. But with tools like Pendo, WalkMe, Gainsight PX, the engine is built in together where you can actually capture user insights, but also based on that, you can trigger in-app guides and say, okay, for all the users who did not complete this workflow within this time frame, I actually want to show them this guide. So it is as powerful and as contextual and as simple. Like basically anybody in this room, we can trigger a guide if these 3 pieces of code are installed in our application. And that is where the biggest conversation needs to happen, because this piece of code actually goes into the product, and that is where we typically need a buy-in from product or engineering team. So that's usually the biggest hump in organizations. And I will cover that towards the end of the presentation of how to get that organizational buy-in to actually get in-app into the product, like that code. So once that code is installed, it's as simple. Like you don't need any dev skills. You don't need to be dependent on your dev teams to actually capture user analytics or product telemetry, or to actually show in-app guidances or messages or notifications to your customers. And then once you have that product telemetry, actually it helps you to surface relevant guides and help your customers so they can actually self-serve. So just want to start with baselining the in-app user guide and engagement. Today, what the problem statement is with respect to customers adopting our products is with regular channels. I think most of you know with emails, the open rates are typically 2 to 3%. And anybody who's seen like above 20% email open rates in their user nurture campaigns? Yeah, typically 2 to 3%, right? Like my team does user nurture campaigns, and if we get anywhere between like 15 to 20% open rates, we're like, woohoo, yeah, this is like, you know. With in-app, actually, we have seen the benchmark is 30%. There is actually 30% user engagement consistently because it is so personalized and so contextualized, and it is in the moment, in the product where the users are. So that is what makes in-app user this, or if you have seen any reasons outside of these, is typically during onboarding process, the product configuration or setup is complex. Or even once they are set up in advanced features, they're like, oh, this is too complex for me to figure out. And we see that very much at Infor. We are an ERP company, so it is very admin and configuration dependent. What we have also seen is limited product know-how and enablement. And actually, last year we did this user nurture campaign, and the stat that we saw was about 44% of our customers were not even aware of a strategic feature that as a company we had rolled out on, and that was one of the things we were betting on. So with in-app user engagement, actually, we think of the transition as like actually first creating awareness with the users, like, hey, something like this exists, did you know? And then enabling them on like the know-how, the value, and being very value-driven. And then, of course, like feature discoverability is a challenge. I was working with Adobe a few years ago, and they had this very cool feature, but it was actually tucked away 10 clicks into the product. So they actually used the in-app user engagement. We strategized and designed an experience, and we saw about 60% uplift in the engagement of that feature, and they had done an A/B testing. They had their data science team and everything. So also with complex products, feature discoverability, it's a great way to get the features in front of the customers. And the product value gap, right? Like typically what a customer expects from the product, the value perceived versus what we believe we are giving them, always a gap. Other challenges, so that's like challenge which the users face, right? But also like if we had to think about like all of us in customer success world and even product teams, for us, I believe the challenges we face are we have very low visibility into usage and product adoption. Yet we are chartered with actually driving adoption. So when we don't have product telemetry, like where do we start from, right? Like there are 100 features, which are the right features to go forward with, which are the features that we believe customers would drive value from. So I'm curious, like any of this resonates with folks in the room as customer success professionals? Anything that doesn't resonate? So, so like again, with the in-app technology, actually the low visibility into usage and product adoption, it is so easily addressable. I want to share a quick anecdote and story here. Like when I joined Infor about 2 years ago, I realized, oh, we have a past failure of Pendo implementation, so it's going to be a tough journey to get in-app as a channel within the company. And I also realized that we had a homegrown user analytics tool. So the moment I lead with, oh, this has got like user engagement, like analytics, I'm going to face resistance because, you know, people want to protect the technology that they have built. So, so it was an interesting long journey. It took me 1 year to get organizational buy-in, believe me or not, from education to change management to POC, where today we are in a position where in the next few weeks, actually, we are going live with the in-app user technology. So what really worked here for me was I had a one-on-one conversation with the head of engineering and head of product and said, hey, we are not trying to replace the user analytics tool that you all have, even though underlying we knew that those insights were not readily available to us, it was still very dev dependent. But the goal was to show them the art of the possible, and we said, hey, we can still use the analytics to drive decisions and strategy that you guys have in place. But what we are missing as a company is to actually show contextual in-product guides and walkthroughs to actually drive the adoption of the features that you guys are building out. So when we flipped the narrative to that and said, hey, this is what's in it for you, and this is how we are going to partner with the technology that you have built and the features that you're building out, it immediately unlocked a whole new conversation, and they looked at it very differently and said, oh, actually, you know, from an engineering perspective also, this is great because all this investment that we are doing in building the product, but if users are not adopting, this is a great way to get in front of the in front of the customers. So those were the conversations I had over like several months with like product head, engineering head, their management, faced a lot of resistance. But every time we were like, hey, we don't want to use the user analytics part of it. We are just going to use, you know, the in-app user guidances. We got to a phase of POC where they proposed like, oh, how about we use our analytics tool, integrate it with this technology and test it out. I'm like, hey, we are doing a POC. Can we just focus on the features and see if it works? And if we decide to implement it, let's figure out how we are going to integrate. So it was, a lot of it was like just focusing and having your eyes on the prize and not boiling the ocean, picking up like very specific use cases and moving forward with it and addressing concerns of different personalities and different organizations and actually showing the ROI of a tool like this, which would have impact on overall customer success metrics. So those were like the stuff that really helped in getting over some of the organizational challenges, which typically we run into in getting a Gainsight PX kind of a product into the into your tool, into your company. Talked about the challenges. So I want to talk about how in-app user engagement sort of strategy helps, and we like to call it product-led customer journey, a little bit about product-led growth, and I'm sure like all of us follow Kyle and like PLG and all of that cool stuff. So in PLG, the model is really like PLG is a team sport, and product and pulling the product team very early on in the customer journey and really reducing that sales cycle. The core fundamental of PLG is that the product needs to be very self-serve, right? If you think of like, I don't know if anybody has used like very recent tools like Gamma or like Monday.com or Asana, like those are tools pretty much you go in and you can start using it yourself. You don't need a lot of training. And they have, so it's very self-serve, very intuitive, but also they have built in a lot of the customer journeys which are self-serve, like there'll be guidances and there'll be in-app resource centers so you can actually engage with them. So we are able to bring that kind of experience into our product. Like right now at Infor, we are actually going through that journey where the product team proposed something like a product-led adoption, and they centered everything around, oh, we are going to drive adoption through in-app user engagement. I'm like, hey, that's great. That's part of customer journey, but what about actually thinking of PLG as part of your development cycle? What about simplifying the product? What about like making it very intuitive and self-serve? So that is a very critical part of product-led customer journey. But with in-app, where we can actually fill the gap is in the interim, in the short term, we can actually use a lot of in-app user guidances and tooltips and like badges to actually help users get enabled on your product until the product team actually figures out simplifying the product. So as customer success, I think we all will agree that our success really depends on how good the product is. And so it's always a constant like conversation with our product teams. So we can do the gaps with in-app user engagement, but ultimately we have to use the insights from product telemetry and have those chats with our product team to actually make changes in the product. So it's a long-term game, but getting a technology like this at least helps all of us organize around common source of truth and data. So yeah, with in-app user engagement and product-led customer journey, we actually pull in the product team early on in the process. From a go-to-market perspective, if customers have tried your product, it actually makes the sales cycle much shorter. And overall reduces the time to value, especially when CS and product teams are involved. And we are using in-app as a way to onboard customers from the get-go. So we actually have implemented at Gainsight, and a lot of our customers had implemented it as well. So we actually saw improvement in time to value and onboarding completion rates directly when we implemented in-app user guides, walkthroughs, and designed things around that. So here's a product-led growth flywheel. This is something we developed in Gainsight, and we had refined it over a period of time. And I still find this very relevant and useful. This is very much centered around the key stages of customer lifecycle: onboarding, adoption, retention, growth. One interesting topic here is that at Info last year, we went on to this journey of, oh, how do we drive product adoption? And we started with customer journey mapping. And I think one of you had some question around how to map customer touch points. Happy to talk to you about that as well. So when we went into this whole customer journey mapping exercise, we realized actually onboarding is a bigger issue than adoption. And if we don't fix onboarding, we are never going to be able to fix the adoption as a problem with the company. So so that is why like I still find this PLG flywheel so relevant, is that whenever we are thinking about in-app user engagement and technology, like starting at an onboarding phase is great, because we are preventing wrong habits from day one. We are enabling customers with the right features and very prescriptively from day one. So then when they're in adoption phase, it is much easier to drive that journey with them. So 3 specific strategies to build great product experiences. And again, like a lot of this is accumulation from a lot of the implementations we've seen over the years and things that we know typically work. Because with in-app or any user engagement channel, many of us tend to boil the ocean, and sometimes the bigger question is, where do I start? Right? So hopefully some of these will help address a lot of those questions for you all, either through in-app user engagement technologies or other problems that you're trying to solve in the organization. But what really helps us, and anytime I solve for any user experience, even till date, I use this framework of mapping the product journey and the value path based on the persona. Especially at Infor, we are like a multi-product company, multiple personas. So every time we're like, oh yeah, let's go and implement it. Okay, but where do we start? So I'm very good at like laser focusing in the company and saying, let's pick a product, let's pick a persona, let's pick a specific stage, either onboarding or adoption. Let's map out what that journey looks like, at least what we believe is the right journey for the customers, and let's start there. So that actually also brings my product people, customer marketing, all the other folks on the same page of, okay, this is what that path looks like, and here are the typical challenges, and here's what our approach is going to be. So this really helps organize all the cross-functional teams around a certain path, and we know what we are up against, where the deviations are. And this is a template that I typically use, is mapping out the user journey. So again, starting with user role and type, what their actions are, what is the stage is in the first 7 days, first 30 days, first 6 months, and what is really the goal of that action. So this gets very tactical, like very specific to workflows that are expected out of specific personas. So again, mapping these out is super helpful anytime we're trying to drive one-to-many or in-app user engagement strategies. And then identifying high-value actions. So one of my product strategy people, he did an exercise with the product team, and they came up with a list of like 60, 70 features of like, hey, if all our customers use these 60, 70 features, it makes them successful. Okay, great. We are an ERP company, get that. But like, those are not things we can always go after. So what are our golden features? So this exercise has helped me actually get a lot of customers to implement and not boil the ocean, including at Infor, where we start with quantitative data of like reviewing adoption patterns of our past successful customers, looking at some of our newer customers, looking at product telemetry, and then also looking at some qualitative data, talking to folks on the field like salespeople, hey, which are the features that typically help you sell? Renewals folks, which are the features that typically help us save renewals? CSMs and support, hey, which are the modules and features that you typically get questions on? So combining the quantitative and qualitative data, it really helps hone down on those golden features or high value actions where our customers would typically get value from. So again, I'm hoping like some of this will be helpful. We've found these really helpful. And if you're in the process of mapping your ideal customer profile, these are some factors to look at. Even when you're implementing any user nurture campaigns, either through email or in-app user engagement, I still use all of this, like what are the objectives, what is the stage, what are the roles, what are their entitlement data. Recently, I launched an AI nurture campaign, which was all agentic end-to-end. In that, we actually used the entitlement data as one of the sourcing factors to personalize the outreach campaign to our customers. And we had about like, if I'm not wrong, I had about like 25% open rate on those emails and very high engagement from the customers who opened it. So we were actually able to personalize it based on the user attributes and on the account attributes. So we really doubled down on the attributes and made it very personalized and contextual to the users. So again, these are like attributes, ICPs that you could use if you're trying to map customer journeys or figure out like ICPs for your product. Second, once you've identified the prescriptive value path and the adoption journey based on like personas, etc. Second is defining an orchestrated multi-channel experience. So on the left, it talks about like in-app onboarding program as an example. So in-app is a great channel. So you could typically start with targeting your very specific 1 or 2 ICPs, have an adoption program laid out like based on the templates that we talked about, collect feedback to actually see how the experience work for the customer, and then also empowering users with some self-serve like bot checklists, badges, reminder guides, so they don't have to pick up the phone and reach out to you every single time they have a question or create a support ticket. But also supplementing it with like a lot of one-to-many channels based on what you have, what the team capacity and resourcing are. I've found a multi-channel experience to be extremely engaging for the customers, in addition to in-app, like nurturing them through emails and like one-to-many webinars and office hours, etc. So we found these strategies to be very effective. And then mapping it to a product timeline, like because when you have multiple touch points having a timeline and having that customer journey mapped out with respect to time and key touch points, super helpful. So again, like I've found having operational clarity to be extremely critical and foundational to any of these strategies and programs, especially at a one-to-many customer engagement level that we roll out. These are just some guides of how you could use like a bot checklist, walkthrough. I'm sure all of us have experienced this in many of the different products that we use. So we can start with a welcome message, give them a bot checklist, which is very prescriptive, and have them give a product to order orientation if they're new users. Another example for a new user workflow guide is starting with the tooltip, guiding them actually step by step on how to use a feature, but also sharing, hey, this is an upcoming webinar which we thought will be useful to you, or like an office hour, come join it. And so we see extremely high amount of registration when we show some in-app nudges and announcements versus general emails. And the third one is tracking success metrics. Again, any program is only as successful as the metrics. So lot of metrics here, but it takes time to build into these metrics. So I always break it down into leading and lagging indicators. So anytime we are rolling out programs, we always start with leading indicators like engagement and awareness, but also like time to value, onboarding completion, adoption rates, etc. But then eventually, how do we tie it back to like retention and revenue and support impact? Because they do reduce support tickets, so we can definitely correlate to support cost savings as well. So those were like sort of the three strategies. One thing I did want to touch upon very quickly was based on like the buy-in, organizational buy-in. This is something that really helped me at Infor. Again, we are a huge company. So like really building your business case is important and creating a proof of concept. So we actually did a 4-month proof of concept that helped engineering team come and tell me that Harshi, I want to buy this technology off the shelf. I don't want to build it. The first time I ever proposed in-app user engagement, the immediate response was, can't we build it? We already have this technology, right? So build versus buy is always a big thing, especially when you have a huge IT organization, product and engineering organization. So having those use case specifically laid out and going into very specific like workflows of this is exactly what I want to do. These are the profiles I want to target, etc., etc. When you actually are very specific with them and you quantify the impact, like they are like, okay, this totally makes sense. So it was that way a very easy journey, though it took a lot of conversations and long time. But yeah, building that business case, proof of concept, quantifying the impact, the cost benefit analysis I did with actually my engineering team to say, hey, if I buy this, this is how much it's going to cost. If you had to build this, these technologies, what is your going to be speed to market? What is going to be your cost? And how are we going to maintain it? So again, I've just put a template out there. If any of you are having those build versus buy decision with your tech team, feel free to use this. The key questions to ask them is if you are putting engineering resources to build this, how does it impact the product deliverables, right? And also now factoring the AI native capabilities, because now there are tools out in the market where agentically agents are actually executing workflows on behalf of the user. So it's a big leap. Jury is still out there whether it's going to work or not. Until then, in-app user engagement is a great way to drive adoption for your customers. So that was my time. I don't know if you have time for questions. No, okay. So I'll be around if anybody wants to have a chat.
Well, give it up for Harshi, everyone. Thank you so much. Super impressive. I think, you know what I really like there, I'm going to start using it. Talk about the adoption journey, rebranding that as a value path. So I love it. So thank you so much. Our next speaker